Kneel and apologize to my girlfriend. Now! Julian snarled, his voice echoing through the plaza. His mistress smirked behind a fake tear, red wine staining her dress. After 5 years of building his empire from the shadows, this was my reward. He thought I was powerless. He didn't know the bodyguards stepping out of the darkness were coming for me, the chairwoman holding 60% of his life. My name is Elena, and standing in the shadows of the grand ballroom at the plaza, I looked less like a wife and more like a ghost haunting her own life. The air in the room was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the murmur of New York's elite, gathered here for the annual charity gala. From my vantage point near a marble column, I watched Julian, the man I had devoted the last 5 years to, basking in the spotlight. As the CEO of Novatech, he looked dashing in his bespoke tuxedo, radiating the arrogance of a man who believed he had conquered the world, but he was not alone. Sienna, his 24-year-old secretary, stood glued to his side, her fingers tracing the lapel of his jacket with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. She was playing the role of the soulmate perfectly, giggling at his jokes while I, the legal wife, remained invisible in the corner. Then, her eyes caught mine. A malicious glint flickered across her face. She whispered something to Julian, then detached herself from him and walked straight toward me, swaying her hips in a white designer gown that probably cost more than Julian's monthly salary before I built him up. As she passed me, Sienna suddenly lurched forward. With theatrical precision, she tipped her glass, sending a cascade of dark red wine splashing across the pristine white fabric of her own dress. She shrieked, throwing herself onto the polished floor. Elena, why would you push me? I know you are jealous. But this is too much. The music seemed to stop. Heads turned. Julian was there in a heartbeat, rushing not to me, but to the woman sobbing on the floor. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't look for the truth. He turned his eyes on me, and they were filled with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. "You are crazy!" Julian screamed, his voice booming across the silent ballroom. He pointed a trembling finger at the floor. "Look what you did. You are pathetic. Kneel down and apologize to her right now." The silence in the room was deafening. Hundreds of eyes fixed on us. I stood tall, smoothing the fabric of my dress, and looked Julian dead in the eye. My voice was calm, a stark contrast to his hysteria. "Julian, are you sure you want me to do this? This is your last chance." He let out a sharp, cruel laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "Last chance for what? You are a useless leech. Elena, I dragged you out of poverty. I put clothes on your back. If you do not get on your knees right now, I will cut every credit card you have and throw you out on the street tonight. You will be nothing without me." I did not move. His face turned a violent shade of red. Losing his patience, he raised his hand, aiming a slap directly at my face to force me into submission, but his hand never made contact. 2 massive figures in black suits materialized from the crowd like specters. Before Julian's palm could graze my cheek, one of the men caught his wrist in a vice-like grip. With a swift, professional motion, the bodyguard twisted Julian's arm behind his back. "Ah!" Julian screamed, his knees buckling under the pressure as he was forced to bow forward. The second bodyguard stepped in front of me, blocking me from the chaotic scene. He produced a silk handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to me with a deep, respectful bow. "Madam Chairwoman," he said, his voice projecting clearly enough for the stunned onlookers to hear. "The car is ready. There is no need for you to argue with this trash. As the head of the Pegasus Group, your time is too valuable." A collective gasp ripped through the room. The name Pegasus was legendary. It was the mysterious investment fund that held a controlling interest in half the tech companies in the city. More importantly, Everyone in that room knew that Pegasus owned exactly 60% of Novatech. Julian's face went from red to a ghostly white. He looked up at me from his awkward, painful position, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. Pegasus, he stammered, the arrogance draining out of him like water from a cracked glass. You are the chairwoman I took the handkerchief but didn't use it. Instead, I slowly slid the diamond wedding band off my finger. It hit the floor with a distinctive ping, rolling until it stopped right next to the puddle of spilled wine and Sienna's ruined dress. Julian, I said, my voice cold and final. You are fired from my life, and congratulations. Novatech just lost its biggest investor. The silence inside the limousine was a stark contrast to the chaos I had just unleashed at the plaza. As the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. I leaned my head against the cool glass and closed my eyes, letting the memories of the last 5 years wash over me. I remembered the day I met Julian. I was the sole heiress to the Pegasus dynasty, tired of men who only looked at my bank account. So, I hid it all. I became Elena, the ordinary girl with an ordinary job, just to experience a love that was pure. I gave him everything. I used my private funds to clear his debts, my connections to open doors that would have remained forever locked to a man of his station. I turned a low-level employee into a CEO, yet, in his mind, every promotion and every closed deal was a testament to his own undeniable genius. He never once suspected that the luck following him had a name, and that name was Elena. My phone vibrated violently against the leather seat, snapping me back to the present. The screen lit up with his name, Julian. It buzzed again and again, a desperate, frantic rhythm. I didn't feel the urge to answer. With a numb thumb, I pressed the block button, silencing him. The car pulled up to the private entrance of a penthouse in Manhattan, a property Julian didn't even know existed. This was my sanctuary, paid for with money he couldn't comprehend. By 8 o'clock the next morning, my lawyer, Marcus, had delivered the divorce papers to Julian's office, along with a formal notice that Pegasus was withdrawing 60% of its capital immediately. I wasn't there to see it, but Marcus recounted the scene with grim satisfaction later. Julian had been pacing his office, sweating, on the verge of a total breakdown. But then Sienna had arrived. She didn't pack her things. She didn't apologize. Instead, she played the victim again. Julian, honey, don't worry. She had apparently cooed, stroking his arm. She is just bluffing. You know how she is. Women are always soft. She is just trying to scare you into taking her back. And Julian, in his infinite arrogance, believed her. He convinced himself that I was merely a legal representative for Pegasus, a figurehead with no real power to destroy him. He thought signing the papers would call my bluff. I will sign, he had told Marcus with a sneer. Let's see how she survives without my credit cards. I need to teach her a lesson. When Marcus called to tell me the papers were signed, I didn't feel relief. I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my lower abdomen that had been nagging me since the previous night. It wasn't just stress, fearing the worst. I went to a private hospital downtown. The sterile smell of the examination room made me nauseous. The doctor, a kind woman with graying hair, looked at the chart and then at me. Congratulations, Elena, she said softly. You are 6 weeks pregnant. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at the grainy black and white image on the screen, a tiny speck of life. My hand went to my stomach instinctively. A baby. Julian's baby. For a moment, a wave of weakness hit me. Should I tell him? Was this a sign to forgive? Then, the memory of his face at the gala flashed in my mind, the contorted rage, the command to kneel, the way he looked at Sienna. No, that man was dead to me. I walked out of the examination room, clutching the ultrasound report, my mind racing. I was so distracted that I nearly collided with a tall figure standing in the hallway. I looked up, ready to apologize, and froze. Silas. It was Silas, Julian's fiercest business rival and, more importantly, my closest friend from university. He was the only one who knew the truth about my identity, the one who had watched me sacrifice myself for Julian from the sidelines. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, softened instantly when he saw me. His gaze dropped to the paper in my hand, identifying the ultrasound image immediately. He didn't ask whose it was. He didn't ask why I was alone. He just looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I heard about last night," he said, his voice low and steady. I tried to hide the trembling of my hands. "It is over. Silas, I am done." He took a step closer, his presence enveloping me like a fortress. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "If you need a war, I will be your sword. If you need peace, I will be your shield." It had been exactly 1 month since the divorce was finalized, while I was busy rebuilding my empire from the glass-walled office of Pegasus. Julian's life was rapidly disintegrating into chaos. I received daily reports on the state of his household and his company, and the details were pathetic. My former housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, called me in tears to resign just 2 weeks after I left. She told me the penthouse was a disaster zone. Sienna treated the staff with disdain, firing the cook for looking at her the wrong way and refusing to manage the household. Instead of maintaining the home, she spent her days online shopping, piling boxes of designer shoes and handbags in the hallway while dust gathered on the furniture. Julian, who had always suffered from a sensitive stomach, was paying the price. For 5 years, I had woken up at 5 in the morning to cook him medicated congee and herbal soups. Now, he was living on greasy takeout and champagne. "This food tastes like garbage," Julian reportedly screamed at a dinner party, clutching his abdomen in agony as his face turned pale. "Where is the soup? The one Elena used to make. Why can't anyone do anything right?" Sienna just rolled her eyes, inspecting her fresh manicure. "Oh, stop whining. Julian, I am not your maid. Hire a chef if you are so fragile. You are ruining the vibe." At the office, the situation was even worse. Longtime partners were pulling out of deals one by one. They had never really respected Julian's brash arrogance. They had tolerated him because they trusted me. I was the one who remembered their children's birthdays, the one who smoothed over his insults with charming gifts, the Mrs. Elena they admired. Without me, Julian was just a rude man in an expensive suit. Then came the moment I had anticipated. My source at Novatech told me that Julian had stumbled upon his old business proposals in my study. He saw the red ink covering the pages. He saw the corrections, the risk assessments, and the strategic pivots I had written in the dead of night while he slept. He finally realized that the brilliant strategies he took credit for were actually my work. She did this," he whispered to his empty office, staring at the documents with trembling hands. All this time, she was the one fixing my mistakes. Meanwhile, Sienna was tightening the noose. Despite the company's stock plummeting, she demanded a new villa in the Hamptons. "But baby," she whined, draping herself over his desk while he tried to save a failing merger. "You promised if you don't buy it, people will think you are broke. Do you want them to laugh at us? I need security, especially with your ex-wife trying to ruin us." The final blow to his ego came on a Tuesday morning. I was on the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline read, "The Anonymous Investment Queen Stepping into the Light." I looked powerful, wearing a sharp crimson suit, a stark contrast to the submissive housewife he remembered. That same evening, a paparazzi photo of me dining with Silas surfaced. We were laughing, his hand resting gently on mine in a gesture of intimate protection. Julian saw it. I knew he did because he got drunk. While Julian drowned his sorrows in scotch, Sienna was busy on her burner phone in the bathroom, negotiating the sale of Novatech's research data to his biggest competitor. She smelled the sinking ship and was grabbing a life raft. Late that night, my private phone buzzed. It was a number I had forgotten to block. I let it go to voicemail. I played the message back in the silence of my penthouse. Julian's voice was slurred, thick with alcohol and rage. Elena, you think you are so special. You are nothing. You betrayed me. I loved you, and you left me for that snake, Silas. Come back here and fix this mess. You owe me. I am the victim here. The message ended with the sound of glass shattering against a wall. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I simply pressed delete. Mr. Sterling, I said into the intercom to my assistant, my voice steady and cold. Initiate Project Phoenix. We are acquiring Novatech. I want that company under my control by the end of the week. The boardroom at Pegasus was a theater of war, and Project Phoenix was our battle plan. Silas sat to my right, not as a superior, but as a partner. We were methodically acquiring Novatech's bad debts, buying them up for pennies on the dollar from nervous creditors who smelled blood in the water. The acquisition strategy for the Asian market needs adjustment, I said, pointing to the projected figures on the screen. If we push too hard now, the local regulators will balk. We need a softer entry. Silas nodded, turning to the room full of senior executives. Listen to her. Elena's instincts on this market are sharper than any algorithm we have. We follow her lead on this. His voice held a note of genuine admiration that made my chest tighten. It was so different from the way Julian used to speak over me in meetings, dismissing my suggestions as cute or uninformed. Here, I was the general. Julian, meanwhile, was trying to storm the castle gates. My secretary, a formidable woman named Margaret, took great pleasure in relaying his attempts to see me. He is in the lobby again. Madam Chairwoman. Margaret buzzed over the intercom. He says it is urgent and that he is your husband. Ex-husband. I corrected, signing a document that would freeze another of his assets. Tell him the chairwoman does not see strangers without an appointment. And Margaret calls security if he raises his voice. While Julian was being humiliated in the lobby, I set the trap for his little spy. I knew Sienna was desperate. I arranged a private tea with a mutual acquaintance I knew was a gossip, specifically mentioning a breakthrough quantum chip that Novatech was supposedly developing a project that didn't exist. I made sure to leave a confidential file on the table when I went to the powder room. Sienna took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Within 48 hours, she had sold the stolen intel to Cyberdyne, Julian's fiercest competitor. Cyberdyne immediately poured millions into countering a technology that was nothing but a ghost. When their engineers realized the specs were scientifically impossible, the backlash was instantaneous and brutal. Cyberdyne didn't just fire the project lead, they sued. They slapped a massive lawsuit on Julian and Sienna for corporate espionage and fraud, claiming Sienna, acting as Julian's executive secretary, had intentionally sold them sabotage material. The news hit the market like a bomb. Novatech's stock, already shaky, plummeted to an all-time low. Shareholders were rioting outside the headquarters, waving placards demanding Julian's immediate resignation. It was in the midst of this legal firestorm that Julian discovered the final betrayal. The lawsuit forced a forensic audit of his personal finances, and the accountants found a hemorrhage. $300,000. Julian's voice cracked as he stared at the bank statements in his office. Where did this go? He traced the transfers. They weren't business expenses. They were payments to an underground casino and wire transfers to a man named Rico Sienna's secret boyfriend, a deadbeat gambler she had been funding with Julian's money. I heard about the confrontation from the staff who were still loyal to me. Julian had stormed home to the penthouse, throwing the bank statements at Sienna. "You stole from me," he screamed. "I gave you everything I left my wife for you." Sienna didn't cry this time. She laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. She was packing a suitcase, shoving jewelry into it. "You think I love you," she sneered, zipping the bag shut. "I only loved your money." "Julian. But look at you now. You are pathetic. You are about to be a pauper." "Do you really think I would stay with a loser who is going to prison?" "Get out," Julian roared, grabbing her arm. "I am going," she yelled back, wrenching herself free. "And don't worry, I am taking the diamond necklace. Consider it severance pay." She slammed the door, leaving him in the echoing silence of the penthouse. Julian sank onto the floor of the empty living room. The house was cold. There was no smell of dinner cooking. There was no soft jazz playing. He looked at the front door, hallucinating for a moment that it would open and I would walk in, shaking a wet umbrella, smiling and asking him how his day was. He remembered the rainy nights when I would wait up for him with a warm towel and hot tea, no matter how late he was. "Elena," he whispered into the darkness, his voice breaking, but the only answer was the distant siren of a police car, getting closer and closer. As the weeks turned into months, my body began to change in ways I could no longer hide beneath loose blazers. My belly had rounded, a visible testament to the life growing inside me. Unlike Julian, who had always viewed my physical needs as an inconvenience. Silas treated my pregnancy with a reverence that bordered on worship. He was not doing it out of obligation. It was in the way he would instinctively place a cushion behind my back during meetings, or how he learned to brew the exact blend of ginger and lemon tea that settled my morning nausea. One evening, as we sat in my living room reviewing acquisition files, the guilt that had been gnawing at me finally became too much. I placed my hand over his, stopping him from turning the page. "Silas," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk. You are doing so much for me, but I need to be clear. This baby, it is Julian's." I held my breath, waiting for the shift in his eyes, the disappointment I was so used to receiving from men. But Silas simply closed the file and looked at me with a warmth that melted the ice around my heart. "Elena," he said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Biology is just biology. This child is innocent. It does not matter whose blood runs in its veins. It will bear the name of the person who raises it with love. If you let me, I would be honored to be that person." Tears pricked my eyes, but our moment of peace was fragile. The next morning, a blurry photo of me leaving the obstetrics clinic was plastered all over social media. The caption speculated on the timeline, and it did not take a genius to do the math. Julian saw it. For Julian, this news was not a revelation of fatherhood. It was a lifeline. He realized that the conception date fell squarely within our marriage. In his twisted logic, this child was the link that could drag me back to him and, more importantly, force Pegasus to stop destroying his company. He thought a baby was a bargaining chip. 2 days later, I was leaving the Pegasus headquarters. My driver turned onto Fifth Avenue, only to slam on the brakes. A disheveled figure had run into the middle of the street, blocking our path. It was Julian. He looked nothing like the arrogant CEO from the gala. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes were wild with desperation. Before the security team could exit the trailing vehicle, Julian dropped to his knees right there on the asphalt, in front of halted traffic and curious pedestrians. "Elena," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Elena, please, open the door." My driver looked back at me, ready to reverse, but I shook my head. I opened the door and stepped out, keeping a safe distance. "What are you doing?" Julian, I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. He shuffled forward on his knees, tears streaming down his face. I know about the baby. It is mine." "Elena, you cannot keep my child from me. Please." Come back. We can be a family. I will change, I swear. I will do anything. I looked down at him, remembering the night at the plaza. The irony was bitter. You are kneeling, I observed coldly. But it is too late. This child does not need a father who once forced its mother to kneel and apologize to his mistress. Julian's face twisted. But I am the father, I have rights, before he could lunge at me. Silas stepped out of the car. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace, positioning his broad frame directly between me and Julian. She and the child are currently my family, Silas stated, his voice low but carrying a terrifying weight. You have no standing here. Go back to your hole. Julian snapped. The humiliation was too much. You thief. He roared, scrambling to his feet and swinging a clumsy fist at Silas. Silas didn't even flinch. My bodyguards intercepted Julian instantly, pinning his arms behind his back and forcing his face onto the hood of a parked taxi. Let me go. That is my wife. That is my baby. Julian shrieked, spitting foam as the crowd held up their phones, recording every second of his breakdown. Get him out of here. Silas ordered the guards, then turned to me, his face instantly softening as he shielded me from the flashing cameras. Are you okay? I am tired. Silas, I whispered, leaning into his chest. I am so tired. The video of Julian attacking a pregnant woman and her partner went viral within the hour. The public, who had already turned on him, now branded him a violent harasser. His reputation was incinerated. Seeing my exhaustion, Silas made a decision. He canceled all my meetings. We are leaving. He told me as he guided me back into the car. I have a villa on the coast. No reporters, no Julian. Just the ocean and peace. You need to rest. As the car pulled away, leaving Julian screaming in the distance, I finally let myself breathe. Desperation transforms people, stripping away their humanity until only the animal remains. I thought I had seen the worst of Julian and Sienna, but I had underestimated the depths to which a cornered rat would sink. Sienna did not disappear quietly into the night, hunted by loan sharks and cut off from her easy life. She returned to the man she had helped destroy, not for reconciliation, but for extraction. She cornered Julian in his decaying office, slapping a folder of documents onto his desk. They were not love letters, they were detailed records of tax evasion schemes Julian had orchestrated 3 years ago, schemes she had quietly photocopied for insurance. You are going to give me $500,000. Julian, she had reportedly told him, her voice sharp with panic, or the IRS gets these. And we both know. Prison doesn't suit your complexion. Julian was insolvent. He had no liquidity. His assets were frozen, and his reputation was in ashes. Faced with prison on one side and ruin on the other, his mind snapped. He concocted a plan so delusional it made my blood run cold when I later learned of it. He decided that if he could just get me alone, if he could just force me to sign over the rights to Pegasus or authorize a massive transfer, he could pay off Sienna and flee the country. He reached out to the underbelly of the city, hiring a group of low-level thugs to intercept me. He gave them my old schedule. He told them I went to the organic market on Tuesday mornings and the yoga studio on Thursdays. He didn't know that my life had changed completely, that I hadn't stepped foot in a grocery store in months, and that my yoga instructor now came to the villa. But Silas knew. His security network was a web that caught every vibration in the city. He is making calls to the Ivanov brothers, Silas told me one evening, his face grim as he laid surveillance photos on the coffee table. They are kidnappers. Elena, he is not just trying to harass you. He intends to take you. My hand instinctively went to my stomach. Fear spiked in my chest, hot and sharp, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I was done looking over my shoulder. Let him try, I said, looking up at Silas. In fact, let's help him. I will be the bait. Absolutely not, Silas growled, pacing the room like a caged tiger. You are pregnant. I will not risk you or the baby. We go to the police now. The police need hard evidence of intent. Silas, I argued, standing up to face him. If we arrest him now, he gets a slap on the wrist for conspiracy. I want him gone forever. I want him to commit the act so we can bury him under the jail. I formulated the plan. I would agree to meet Julian, pretending I wanted to discuss a settlement for the sake of the baby. I chose the location an abandoned textile warehouse in Brooklyn. It was a cruel choice. It was the place where Julian had first taken me to see the city skyline 10 years ago, back when we were broke students eating cheap pizza on the roof. While we prepared the trap, the alliance of thieves crumbled. Sienna, terrified that Julian's kidnapping plot would implicate her as an accessory to a violent felony and squeezed by her own debt collectors, made a deal. She walked into the precinct and sold Julian out. She gave the detectives everything: the tax records, the blackmail attempts, and the plan to abduct me. By the time the night of the meeting arrived, the warehouse was surrounded. Police snipers lay on the adjacent rooftops, and Silas's private security team was hidden in the shadows of the loading dock. I pulled up to the rusted gates in a black sedan. Silas was in my earpiece, his voice tight with anxiety. We are right here. Elena, one wrong move, and we breach. Do not let him get within 5 feet of you. I trust you, I whispered, stepping out of the car. I wore a heavy coat to shield myself from the biting wind, a wire taped securely to my chest. The warehouse was cavernous and smelled of rot and old oil. In the center of the vast, empty space, under the flickering light of a single bulb, stood Julian. He looked like a phantom. His eyes were sunken, his skin sallow, and his clothes hung off his frame. He was pacing frantically, muttering to himself. When he saw me, he stopped. A twisted mixture of relief and mania washed over his face. You came, he rasped, taking a step toward me. I knew you would come. You still care, don't you? I am here to end this. Julian, I said, my voice echoing in the silence. What do you want? I want my life back, he screamed, the sound tearing through the air. I want what is mine. Sign the papers. Elena, just sign them. And we can forget all this. We can be a family again. He looked deranged, a man wrestling with his own demons and losing. I stood my ground, my hand resting protectively over my unborn child, recording every word of his madness. The echo of Julian's scream died in the vast emptiness of the warehouse, but the nightmare was just beginning. He stepped to the side, revealing a shadow I hadn't noticed in the dim light. It was Sienna. She was bound to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Julian hadn't just come to beg. He had come prepared for a hostage exchange if things went south. He ripped the tape off her mouth with a cruel tear. Tell her, Julian commanded, shoving Sienna's shoulder. Tell her what we need. Sienna gasped for air, looking from him to me with a mix of fear and venom. Even in this state, her hatred for me burned bright. You ruined everything. Julian roared, turning back to me, his gun a small, trembling pistol wavering between me and Sienna. It is all your fault. If you had just stayed a quiet, obedient wife, none of this would have happened. I want the transfer papers signed. Now, and I want $50 million wired to the Cayman account. Do it, or I swear, I will burn this whole place down with us inside. I stood still, the cold air biting at my cheeks, but my voice was steady, anchored by the recording device taped to my chest. Julian, look at yourself, I said, my tone cutting through his hysteria. You are not a victim. You are a tyrant who lost his throne. You don't love anyone, not me. Not Sienna, and certainly not the child I am carrying. You only love your own reflection. You lost everything because you are greedy. And frankly, you are stupid." "Shut up!" he shrieked, his face contorted. Suddenly, Sienna made her move. She had been working on the ropes binding her wrists, and with a desperate surge of adrenaline, she broke free. But instead of running away, she lunged toward me. In her hand, she clutched a jagged piece of metal she must have found on the floor, a makeshift shiv. Her eyes were maniacal. She didn't care about the money. She just wanted to destroy the woman who remained calm while she fell apart. "Die, you bitch!" she screamed. I flinched, bracing for impact, but Julian reacted faster. Not out of love for me, but out of greed. I was his ticket to $50 million. A dead Elena was worthless to him. "No," Julian yelled. He shoved Sienna violently to the side. The force of his push sent her flying. She crashed hard against a rusted industrial pillar. There was a sickening thud as her head struck the concrete floor. She crumpled instantly, lying motionless in a growing pool of blood. Julian stared at her body for a split second, then looked at me, his eyes completely unhinged. He dropped the gun and pulled a hunting knife from his belt. The transition from desperate negotiator to cornered animal was complete. "See what you made me do," he hissed, advancing on me. "Kneel down, sign the papers, sign them, or we all die right here." He lunged. I stepped back, but my heel caught on debris. I saw the glint of the blade arcing toward me. Crash! The high windows of the warehouse shattered inward in a simultaneous explosion of glass. Flashbangs detonated, filling the room with blinding white light and deafening noise. Police dropped the weapon. Through the smoke, a figure moved faster than the tactical team. It was Silas. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a force of nature. He cleared the distance between the loading dock and Julian in seconds. Just as Julian raised the knife again, Silas launched a devastating kick that connected squarely with Julian's wrist. The knife clattered away into the darkness. Before Julian could even register the pain, Silas followed up with a right hook that sounded like a sledgehammer hitting meat. Julian's head snapped back, and he hit the floor, blood spraying from his broken nose. "Get off her!" Silas roared, standing over him, chest heaving. The tactical team swarmed in, pinning Julian to the ground. I stood frozen, the adrenaline crash hitting me all at once. My vision blurred. A sharp, cramping pain seized my lower abdomen, far worse than before. I gasped, clutching my stomach as my legs gave way. "Elena!" Silas was there instantly, catching me before I hit the cold concrete. My baby," I whispered, the pain stealing my breath. I could hear Julian screaming in the background as they dragged him away in handcuffs. "Elena, tell them I am the father. You can't do this, Elena." His voice faded into a tunnel of noise. The last thing I felt was Silas's arms around me, holding me tight, and his voice frantically calling for a medic before the darkness took me completely. The smell of antiseptic was the first thing to reach me, pulling me out of the deep, black void. I blinked my eyes open, the harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital room stinging my vision. My hand instinctively went to my stomach. It was still there, the curve, the life. "You are awake." The voice was rough, like gravel. I turned my head to see Silas sitting in a chair beside my bed. He looked terrible, and yet he had never looked more beautiful. He was wearing the same shirt from the warehouse, now wrinkled and stained with grime. A shadow of dark stubble covered his jaw, and deep purple circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He was holding my hand so tightly that his knuckles were white, even while he had been dozing. "The baby," I whispered, my voice raspy. "Safe," Silas said, letting out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 48 hours. He squeezed my hand. "The doctor said it was a threatened miscarriage due to the stress and the fall, but You are both fighters. You just need rest. I looked at him, really looked at him. For 5 years, I had chased Julian's approval, cooking meals he didn't eat, buying gifts he didn't appreciate. But here was Silas, a titan of industry, sleeping in a plastic chair and refusing to leave my side for 2 days straight. He didn't offer me poetry. He offered me his presence. He didn't promise to catch me. He had already caught me. This wasn't the flashy romance of novels. It was the quiet, unshakable bedrock of real love. While I recovered, the world outside was dismantling the monsters of my past. The news of the kidnapping attempt had spread like wildfire. Julian was finished. The district attorney threw the book at him: kidnapping, extortion, tax evasion, and assault with a deadly weapon. The evidence, my recording, the warehouse ambush. Sienna's testimony was overwhelming. Speaking of Sienna, she woke up a day after me. The blow to her head had caused temporary amnesia. She couldn't remember the last month of her life. But the law has a long memory. Even without her memory of the kidnapping, the fraud charges and the corporate espionage she had committed prior were enough to see her moved from the hospital directly to a holding cell. 2 weeks later, I was strong enough to return to work, but not as the victim. I walked into the headquarters of Novatech, my headquarters now. I signed the final acquisition papers with a flourish. The name Novatech was scraped off the building's facade that very afternoon. In its place, we raised the banner of Phoenix Corp. It was a symbol of my rebirth. I had risen from the ashes of my marriage, stronger and more brilliant than before. However, there was one final loose end to tie. My lawyer insisted I needed Julian to sign away his parental rights to prevent any future legal battles over the baby. I didn't want to see him, but I knew I had to close the door firmly. I went to the detention center on a rainy Tuesday. The visiting room was cold, separated by a thick pane of bulletproof glass. When the guards brought Julian in, I barely recognized him. The arrogant man in the tuxedo was gone. In his place sat a shriveled, trembling creature in an orange jumpsuit. His hair was shaved, his face gaunt. When he saw me, he threw himself against the glass, sobbing uncontrollably. "Elena, Elena, please," he wailed, tears streaming down his face. "I am sorry I was crazy. The stress. Sienna, she made me do it. I love you. Please, get me out of here. I will do anything. I will be your servant. I will scrub your floors. Just give me another chance." I sat there, perfectly still, my hands resting calmly on the table. I watched him beg, watched him unravel, and felt absolutely nothing, no anger, no hate, just a profound indifference. I slid the papers through the slot. "Sign them." "Julian," I said. He looked at the papers, then back at me, his eyes wide with panic. "But I am the father." "You are a sperm donor," I corrected him, my voice devoid of warmth. "And a criminal." He signed with a shaking hand, weeping the entire time. When he was done, he pressed his palm against the glass. "Elena, please, I can change." I stood up, smoothing my coat over my baby bump. I looked him dead in the eye. "Julian, the man I loved died the night you told me to kneel. You are just a ghost haunting a cell." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You wanted me to kneel. Now you can spend the rest of your life kneeling before the law and repenting for what you did." I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him scream my name one last time, a desperate, broken sound that was cut off as the heavy metal door slammed shut, sealing him in the darkness forever. Time moved differently after the storm had passed. It wasn't the frantic, anxious ticking of a clock I used to hear when waiting for Julian to come home. It was a slow, golden pour of honey. As my belly grew heavy with life, Silas became my constant orbit. He wasn't just present, he was immersed. He read books on prenatal development aloud to my stomach every night. his deep voice vibrating against my skin as if introducing himself to the soul growing inside me. We spent weekends walking along the private beach of the villa, his hand always ready to steady me. One afternoon, while we were shopping for the nursery, Silas stopped in front of a display of tiny shoes. He picked up a pair of soft white sneakers, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. He turned to me, his eyes shining with a vulnerability I rarely saw in the boardroom. He didn't drop to one knee. He knew I had had enough of kneeling for one lifetime. Instead, he simply held out the tiny shoes. "Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't have a ring right now because I know diamonds don't impress you, but I have these. I want to be the one who ties these laces. I want to be the one who picks him up when he falls. I want to walk every step of this journey with you. Will you let me guide these little feet alongside you?" I looked at the shoes, then at the man holding them, the man who had fought for me, protected me, and cherished me. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time in years, they were happy tears. "Yes," I whispered, pulling him into a hug that felt like coming home. "Yes, Silas." Our wedding was nothing like the grand, suffocating spectacle of my first marriage. It was held in the garden of our estate, under a canopy of wisteria. There were no press, no paparazzi, just 20 of our closest friends and most trusted partners. I wore a simple cream dress that flowed over my baby bump, and Silas wore a suit that matched the ocean in his eyes. I felt a profound sense of lightness. I wasn't the trophy wife, or the secret investor, or the shadow anymore. I was Elena, the chairwoman, the mother, the beloved. During the reception, as guests laughed and clinked glasses, a waiter approached me with a small, wrapped package. "A delivery for you, madam," he said. "No return address." I stepped aside to open it. Inside the box lay an old leather-strapped watch. My breath hitched for a second. It was the watch I had bought Julian for his 30th birthday, the one he had thrown in a drawer because it wasn't a Rolex. Tucked underneath was a scrap of paper with handwriting I recognized instantly, though it was shaky and jagged. It read just 2 words, "I'm sorry." I stared at it. A year ago, this might have broken me. It might have sent me spiraling into guilt or anger, but now I felt nothing but a distant pity. I didn't even show it to Silas. I walked over to the large trash bin near the catering tent and dropped the watch and the note inside. The metal made a dull thud as it hit the bottom. I turned around and walked back to my husband, leaving the ghost of Julian among the garbage where he belonged. Life continued to bloom. My business empire expanded. Phoenix Corp became the market leader in sustainable tech, and I was hailed as a symbol of female independence. But my favorite moments were the quiet ones at home. Silas, the ferocious businessman, was comically terrified of the impending fatherhood. I caught him practicing diaper changes on a teddy bear in the middle of the night, muttering to himself about proper sanitation protocols. "You are doing it wrong," I teased from the doorway one night, watching him struggle with the sticky tabs. He looked up, looking flustered. "This bear is uncooperative. Elena, I hope our son has better discipline." We both laughed, the sound filling the nursery. Then, the day finally came. The contractions started at dawn, sharp and rhythmic. Silas turned pale, forgetting every protocol he had learned, and rushed me to the hospital in record time. The hours of labor were a blur of pain and exhaustion, but Silas never left my side. He held my hand, wiped my brow, and whispered words of encouragement when I thought I couldn't go on. "You are a warrior, Elena," he said, his voice steady in my ear. "You can do this. He is almost here." And then, with one final earth-shattering push, the world changed again. A loud, lusty cry pierced the air of the delivery room. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, lifting the small, wriggling body into the air. As they placed him on my chest, warm and wet and miraculously alive, I looked at Silas. Tears were streaming down his face. Unashamed, we had won. The darkness was gone, and in my arms lay our new, bright beginning. The baby boy lying in the hospital bassinet was a miracle of biology and timing. He had my nose and my chin, but undeniably, he had Julian's eyes the same shade of deep hazel that I once found charming. But when he smiled in his sleep, a fleeting, radiant expression that lit up the room, it was all me. Silas didn't see the ghost of my ex-husband in the child's face. He saw only the future. He scooped the baby up with a gentleness that belied his size, cradling him against his chest. "Leo," Silas announced to the room of family and nurses, his voice ringing with pride. "His name is Leo, the lion, because he is brave like his mother." He looked down at the infant and whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Welcome to the world, my son." Far away from our bubble of joy, inside the cold, gray walls of a maximum security prison, a different scene was unfolding. In the communal recreation room, the television was blaring the evening news. A segment aired about the rebirth of Phoenix Corp and featured a clip of Silas and me leaving the hospital, beaming with our newborn. Julian was sitting in the back row. Witnesses later said he stood up, his eyes glued to the screen, watching the happiness he had thrown away. He saw Silas holding the baby his biological son and claiming him as his own. The regret, the jealousy, and the sheer weight of his failures hit him like a physical blow. He clutched his chest, gasping for air as his face turned purple. By the time the guards reached him, it was too late. Julian died on the dirty linoleum floor, alone, surrounded by strangers, his heart literally bursting from bitterness and grief. When the news reached me, I didn't cry. I felt a strange, heavy chain lift from my soul. Julian's death meant no more custody battles, no more looking over my shoulder, no legal threats. We were truly, finally free. Time marched on, and karma, as it turned out, had a sense of humor. Sienna was released from prison 2 years later, with a criminal record for fraud and corporate espionage, and no real skills beyond manipulation. Her options were non-existent. She ended up taking the only job she could find a janitorial position. Specifically, the night shift cleaning crew at Phoenix Corp. One evening, I was leaving late after a board meeting. As I walked through the marble lobby, I saw a figure in a gray uniform scrubbing a scuff mark on the floor. She looked up. It was Sienna. Her beauty had faded, replaced by the hard lines of a hard life. She froze when she saw me, her face flushing with humiliation. She lowered her head, bracing for an insult, waiting for me to mock her the way she had mocked me at the plaza. I didn't stop. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply walked past her as if she were part of the architecture. I didn't give her the satisfaction of my anger. My indifference was the ultimate punishment. She was no longer worth even a second of my time. 3 years passed in a blur of happiness. Leo grew into a boisterous toddler with a laugh that echoed through our home. One Sunday afternoon, he was stumbling across the living room, chasing a toy car. He tripped and fell right into Silas's waiting arms. Dada Leo squealed, hugging Silas's leg. Dada up. Silas lifted him, his face softening into that look of pure adoration he reserved for us. "I have got you, Leo. Always." That evening, we stood on the balcony of the tallest skyscraper in the city, the headquarters of our combined empire. The city lights glittered below us like a sea of diamonds. I looked at Silas, holding Leo on his hip, and then down at the streets where I had once felt so small. I remembered the moment Julian had screamed at me to kneel. It felt like a lifetime ago, a scene from a movie I had once watched but no longer starred in. "Silas," I said softly, resting my head on his shoulder. "Yes, my love." "Thank you," I whispered, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Thank you for helping me stand up. Silas turned and kissed my forehead, pulling me close. Leo giggled and wrapped his little arms around both of our legs, anchoring us together. You stood up on your own. Elena, Silas murmured against my hair. I just held the door open. As the sun set on the city we owned, I knew that the darkness was gone forever. We had won. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Elena's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can enjoy this story.